I think branding more broadly is more about just visuals. It's about how you act, how you talk, and how you look. And they should all be in sync. But I guess as a designer, the principal thing that I'm involved in is the visual part of that brand. And the reason why I think it's so important is it's your first impression. And then as you go on to interact with people, people connect how you act with your brand, and then they're reminded of that. So, just like you remember a face, you would remember, a color or a logo or an icon and become recognizable. And especially, I imagine with coaches, if your main source of getting people to work with you perhaps is on Instagram, it's a crowded marketplace and it's extremely visual. So it's a way that you can use to stand out in that crowd and be recognizable among a huge amount of visual clutter. So having something that's really unique and really reflects you is a competitive advantage, because people will sort of gravitate towards you because they recognize you. And if you have a brand that's been designed sensitively to what makes you tick and thinking about the kind of audience you want to connect with, then it's going to resonate with the right people and draw them to you.
I've got a couple of things that have come to mind to mention at this point, and one is that Simon and I have both come with 20 years of marketing experience respectively, and I think we didn't ever have a conversation about whether we did or didn't need branding. There weren't a lot of startup costs for us, but one of the costs, and not to say it was prohibitive at all, was working with you, and we didn't even bat an eyelid. It just seemed like the thing that we needed to do really early on, and neither of us questioned it. It was just like, right, so we'll be doing our branding in week 3 or something like that. And then also what you've just been talking to is something that I think is really important to us, which is the kind of, we talk about the levels of consciousness that our coaches might like to think about when they work with their clients. And equally for us, I think we are very aware of this kind of journey, existential journey, or kind of meaning journey that people will go on when they work with us. And for us, branding needs to be sensitive to that, so that people get a real subliminal, unconscious sense of where they're going to go in terms of their confidence from what they're going to be greeted with as a brand when they start to hear what we have to say, which might be a very gently, softly approach to talking about their marketing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, a visual brand should start to give you a few clues about what you're going to get when you start interacting with this brand. Are they going to be sort of, I mean, I think your brand is quite energetic and confident. And those are things, you guys obviously put a lot of energy into the community, but it also speaks about the kind of confidence that people who work with you can hopefully gain. So it's kind of putting its money where its mouth is in terms of a brand. It's projecting the things that you want to give to your audience. So
that's so kind of you, and I'm glad that you have it's not just from what we said to you at the beginning, but that it's the feelings that you get from working with us. And I'm glad to say they do. We are we're showing up as you have branded us, what I mean?
I think so. And that's really important, actually, being authentic, because there's a difference between words you might write down about how you want to be perceived, and then there might be different words that perhaps how you are perceived, or how that there can be a gap sometimes. And you need to make sure that when you're thinking about the kind of words you want people to associate with you, that they are genuine to you and how you work, because people can sniff it out a mile off if you're pretending to be one thing through your brand, and then actually how you present when you work with people is very different. So the more genuine and more authentic you can be in how you're representing yourself, the more that'll resonate with people. So there's no point in pretending to be this, it's something you're not, essentially, So yeah, I think that being authentic about who you are, but then representing it is really important. It's something I try to work with clients to figure out, what are they saying because they think it's what they should be, and what they genuinely want should project because that's how they are, And
that's so in the spirit of what we're all about. And we talk about marketing as an opportunity to hold a mirror up to yourself.
Mm.
And also, as coaches, we suggest to our community members that they're very well placed to do marketing because they're so good at asking questions of other people, but in theory then asking questions of themselves. And as you say, it's that thing of you need to make some decisions about what you want to say about yourself, and then also I think you're holding yourself to account, in fact, when you have a brand, because you keep coming back to what you represent. And you know, we've been talking to Carlos and Lawrence recently about our manifesto, as it were, and in a way your brand really sort of is a mirror of what your manifesto is, what you stand for, and you know, what you want people to know you for. So
I think it's also something to measure yourself against, you know, to keep coming back to and making sure that you're being consistent as well, because something that if you want to have a strong brand, you want to be consistent to it, whether that's in use of colours or language. And then if you're able to develop even a basic brand guidelines and then stick to that, then your message becomes more consistent, and then that people feel more likely to trust you, really, because you're not this sort of multifaceted sort of schizophrenic brand. You know, you're kind of always singing from the same hymn sheet in terms of visuals and everything else. So Absolutely. It just comes across as more genuine if you can be consistent.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that always frustrates me about some brands is, or the lack of brand, is that sometimes it's hard to tell whether the same person is behind the social, who is emailing you, who's made the website, who's on LinkedIn. And it's just those subtle things of it. Without a consistency, it's hard to build trust. And with coaches, that's incredibly important, because you're potentially at a point of asking someone to open up to you or to trust you to guide them to something. So if they want to, you know, come to an outcome, feeling or insight, and you know, sometimes it takes them a long time to get to that point, to be like, I need to change. They want to trust someone who's going to help them get to where they want to go. Now, someone who's a bit muddled and inconsistent in just their emails, you know, that immediately is signalling, even if subconsciously, to the client, this person is a bit off and they're a bit on and they're a bit off and they're a bit on. They're not quite here, they're not quite there. Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. Where do I fit in that? And it can be hard. Whereas even if you just use the same font and put your logo on everything, you know, even as like level 1, then at least everything they get is just, this is definitely from this person. This is definitely from this person. I feel like I fit into this. And they've got their shit together, so I can trust them to help me get my shit together.
There's a level of professionality that you're trying to. I mean, I don't think anyone would want to be perceived as unprofessional. And it's funny, actually. One of the questions we often ask clients as part of our discovery process is, what 3 words would you like people to sort of use to describe you? And often people say professional, and actually I always challenge that, because I'm like, who wouldn't want to be seen as professional? And what you really want to identify are 3 words that are really unique to you, that not every other coach would use. But that's, you know, one of the things we sort of challenge people. Okay, professional, trustworthy, definitely, because they're almost a given. But what are the unique words to you? But yeah, you being consistent about about that is really important.
That's making me think about when you have kids and you provide clear boundaries within which they can be playful. So I think we're giving ourselves permission to be playful with our marketing and how we interact with people, because people can keep coming back to the stability and the clarity of our brand, which is consistent. So if we were sort of less clear in our visual communication, we might think we need to be much more professional and less playful in our message. But because we are confident in how we're showing up visually, people, sort of understand that we have license to be a bit playful and sort of lighter-hearted in some of our other approaches, which is really important to us. So hopefully people are starting to see it's similar to niching, and that, you know, when you first start thinking about it, I think people find niching to be quite a difficult one to get their heads around, because they feel like they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. And I think people might have a similar sort of unconscious relationship with branding, in that they think they can do it without thinking too much about it, and it's not that important. And also that, in fact, if they wed themselves to a particular visual identity, they may actually be limiting themselves in some way. But what we would like people to have from this conversation is actually that it can free you up by having a strong brand. So, one of the things we thought we might do, in the spirit of us always being transparent about how we're building this business, is actually take people through our own brand guidelines with you. And so that's the prompt for us to be able to articulate our thinking and how you helped us with it. But it's also a really good way, I think, for people to see what brand guidelines look like, because if you haven't had any professional help with your brand, then brand guidelines won't mean anything to you. Nobody will know what that actually looks like or can help with. So thank you in advance, because yeah, of course.
Sorry, what I was going to say is, before we look at the brand guidelines, might it be useful to understand where we started and then see where we ended up? Or do you want to go where we ended up and then talk about how we got there? Which way do you want to do it?
I think we could talk a little bit about what we did before we created the brand, maybe.
Because it might be interesting to... Yeah, because it's like the kind of, well, what idea do we have? And then what is... Because the brand guide is essentially what you get delivered at the end. That is... when you work with a wonderful professional, they give you the brand guide, and they give you a big pack of logo files and fonts and and all this sort of stuff, which is the end. But actually the beginning bit is often the hardest bit for a lot of people, I think, because you end up with this sort of thing of like, well, I don't know what I want, so how can I ask someone for them to make me that brand guideline and logo when I don't know necessarily how to articulate what I want? So, I mean, me and Francis have obviously worked with several... I mean, I've been working with small businesses for 20 years, so I have been through the branding machine many, many times, to some good success and to some other, like, you just wonder where on earth the client's going. But it's a personal thing, branding, so sometimes you just have to let them go off and do their own thing. But both me and Francis have worked on some, big branding projects, so we sort of had the experience of how to articulate what we wanted. So we sort of leapfrogged a little bit with you, didn't we? Because we kind of came to you with, well, this is what we want. But let's wind it back for coaches who may be sitting watching this thinking, okay, I get why I need a brand, but what's that first step? How do they go about articulating what they want?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as you say, with you, I received an unusually really good brief. So, you were very thorough about the kind of people you were trying to speak to, the kind of qualities you wanted to project. The only part of the brief that I had to quantify with you or check with you was actually you both referenced some style things that you liked, and when I looked at them, some of them were at odds with each other, which was quite funny. But what was great about that is I could come back to you and question it, and then together we figured out what it was, and something that was consistent between you that you liked. And so that's always a challenge, actually, when you're working with more than one client, if you like, to make sure everyone's on the same page. But equally, when you're working with an individual, I still need to make sure I'm on the same page as you. So that first part of the process is me understanding, what your business is about, the core services you're offering, what sort of values you have, and also really trying to get a clear picture of who your audience is, who are the people you're going to be coaching, and what will appeal to them. One question I really like to ask is, how do you want your client to feel when they've used your service? And I really like those questions that speak about emotion. So, how do they feel before they've used your service, and how do they feel afterwards? Because then we start to think about, how can we create a brand that starts to help people feel a certain way. So with you, you talked about people feeling empowered and more confident, and we've tried to create a brand that feels very confident, and it's quite lively, and you're creating a community where there's hopefully lots of interaction. So we try and reflect the sort of end result, if you like. If you want people to feel a certain way, it's good to keep that in your head as something you want to reflect in the brand. We also ask people to think about, especially if someone already has a brand, and I'm sure some of your coaches might have branding and then wonder if it's right. So often when we're looking at a rebrand, we'll ask people, how do you think you're perceived now and how do you want to be perceived? But we try and do that on a scale with certain qualities. So often people say, oh, we want to be perceived as serious, for example. And what I find is very hard to be black and white about serious, not serious. So we try and find sort of opposites. So maybe it's serious versus fun. And we plot on a scale, where do you think you are now between these two qualities and where do you want to move to? And that gives me a lot more shades of grey, if you like, to figure out. It's not a binary decision, is what I'm saying. So often that reveals the nuances of where people think they are sort of on different scales between different qualities. And then obviously my job is to try and convert those qualities, which are words, into a sort of a visual feel. And I guess that's where my expertise is sort of converting those, the language we're using to describe and think about your brand into something that translates visually. Of course, when you create something visual, different people do take different things from it, and it's a very subjective thing. But the good thing about having a good brief at the start and asking all these questions is that there's something that we can come back to and measure the results of what a designer does against that brief. So I can, and I constantly check my work back against, okay, we said we wanted to feel empowering or inspirational. And then I can try and look back at my work and subjectively, but try and look back at the work and think, okay, does this feel empowering? So it's a good way for me to measure the success of something, but also, for everyone to have one point of truth, if you like, for what we're trying to achieve. And the other really important part of that is not just what do you want to project, but what do your audience want to see. And obviously you've got a bit of a problem if they're very different things. So it's really useful to, if you have this relationship with perhaps existing clients, to talk to them about how they, what words would you use to describe us, or what is it that you really love about working with us? And that information is really useful in terms of knowing how they perceive you, and whether you need to change that slightly or whether you just learn from that and want to attract more of the same kind of people. It's sort of useful to understand your audience well in terms of what they're looking for.